When Louis Mizell wanted to represent me, the first thing he said in the meeting was, he said, "You need to drop something from your schedule." He said, "You're too busy. You're doing too many things. You really need to cut something out." And so that was the thing to go. He essentially was teaching at the university, and there were lots of other reasons for doing that besides just wanting to cut one thing out. I was also, like as you said, I was starting to transition into teaching workshops and realizing that if I were to maintain both of those, I would not have time to do artwork. So it just wouldn't. It's a lot of teaching and a lot of time away from home, and so I found that it was much more lucrative to do some workshops and pepper that income with a little bit of sales here and there from the gallery, and some that fluctuates. And that was the formula that seemed to work for me in terms of increase in production. I mean, granted, there are lots of other things that are unseen in an artist's life, and that people may not be aware of. For example, my kids were now older, so it sounds simple, but the reality is that there's a big difference between a 2-year-old and a 12-year-old. Right? It's a huge difference, and so there's a lot more autonomy. And there's a lot more opportunity for me to get work done. And the gallery is pushing my work, so I was making some money there. And that helps. And that helps enormously. And so it's interesting what you were saying, because before the thing we were talking about prior to this was the hierarchy, the hierarchical system of the art world, and how the social media and the internet has created a new paradigm for artists in terms of their income streams, but the hierarchy still is there. I mean, it still has a lot of validity, despite what complaints people have about it. I think it has a lot of validity. It still has a lot of power, and there is still a respectability to being in a good gallery and exhibiting, and it is a pathway to museum shows and collections and that sort of thing. So it does exist still, and I don't think it's going to go away entirely. But back to the question, my productivity was a function of that kind of shift, and I really think that artists should be aware of this, the way careers do shift over time, and these are natural things that happen and necessary. That because your work is going to change, your life is going to change, the way your outlook on how you work is going to change. Hopefully, I mean that hopefully it changes, and once I got I think and to be really, really frank about it, a big part of it was just a sense of confidence that I finally figured out what I really wanted to do. About 15 years ago. Prior to that, I think I didn't really have the confidence to put all my chips down. I was still hedging my bets a little bit, right? And now, I don't have any chips left. They're all in the middle of the table.
Well, what does that mean? Tell us more about that. Were you experimenting with other kinds of media, or were you, looking to invest more in teaching than in making, or what does that mean in terms of the shift?
I'm speaking specifically about the production of my own artwork. Okay.
Yep.
And just putting as many resources as I could into that. Right. A simple example is the building I'm sitting in right now, which is a relatively new studio building last couple of years. And I just decided, and I'd been planning to do this for a while. This wasn't just a spur of the moment decision. These things don't happen that quickly. But it had been planned for many years before that. But I finally just said I have to pull the trigger on this. I have to. If I don't do it now, I may never do it. And part of the reason for doing it was just to have bigger space to do larger pieces, to have assistants. I have an apprentice here right now who's staying with me for 3 months. Okay. And so I have a space for him, area for him to work, and so which I didn't have before.
Right.
So that's an example of pushing the chips into the center of the table.
Exactly.
Hopefully the bet pays off. But I've done that in various ways throughout my career, at different obviously different levels of investment and engagement with that process. But I do think that that's something every artist needs to know. Is that you have to you have to know when is the right time to make those shifts and to
right.
put a bet on yourself, and your work. And I think when I was much younger, I didn't really have the confidence to do that.
Yeah.
It had to slowly build. I had to get to the point where I was. And look, I'm not fully confident now. I'm not saying that I'm like. I'm not saying that this isn't. I'm still in a process. I'm still growing in this and figuring out a career. Careers are things you assess when you went the end,
right?
Not in the middle.
Yeah, well, careers are things that other people assess after you're
exactly.
done, right? They say,
exactly.
Had a good career.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a metaphor for the process of figure sculpture, figure drawing is always one of, you're creating building blocks and then refining that into details, and that's a question of commitment. When do you commit? When do you feel the confidence to go further, go deeper in, or how long do you stay in this kind of like nebulous space of designing a composition or constructing or sketching, and this kind of metaphor or this process. It scales up and down, I feel like, in the entirety of the artist's life, right? And like you're saying, your life shifts. Not only that, but I feel like your relationship to whatever we consider to be the public shifts also, like whether that's people buying or not buying your work, whether that's people sharing or not sharing your work online. Like these things go in waves. And I feel like, when I was 19, my idea was like, person like, I don't know, Jackson Pollock makes it and then he's made it, or like Brian's got this many followers and then he's like good, and you don't have to worry about anything anymore, and the art just flows, and I found in my career that is not the case, and I've never met anyone that just got on the train and didn't have to get off for any stops. Like I've never met anyone like that.
They do exist, but they are very rare.
Yeah, I mean, but
they're usually trust fund kids.
Right, but even still, I've met a few of those, and they all have a professorship here or there. They all have breaks and stops, and I like you. I got the chance. You were talking about working with as an assistant. I worked at the Johnson Atelier for a bunch of years, and the kinds of artists that would come through that foundry were sometimes very well known, very famous. Kiki Smith, George Siegel, Charles Ray, people like that. And these are people in your mind that are just like, they have no problems, right? And it turns out they have problems. They have financial problems, they have time commitment problems, they have personal interruptions. So I found that up and down that ladder, whether you're talking about A-list or whatever comes below that artist, they're all compromising studio time, work time, personal time, and drawing up an equation that is not, A, it's not consistent, B, it's not clean or clear cut, and you get, I feel like this sometimes is fed by these notions where you're like, okay, what does Stephen King do in a day? Well, he wakes up at 6 and he reads for 1 hour, and then he writes for an hour, and then he has tea, and then he talks with his daughter. It's like and I'm sure that
it sounds so neat and clean.
Yeah, and it sounds like every day he writes a perfect page, and that he never balls it up and throws it out or gets frustrated, and that just can't be the case, right? And so that kind of maturing into that understanding is it. I feel like it again, like anything else, like you don't mature into that understanding perfectly. Like there's days when I can feel quite intimidated by looking around online and being like, Gerhard Demetz has a perfect life, look at that guy's studio and look at that guy's work, and he just pumps it out, and and it takes quite a bit of concentration almost sometimes to remind myself, like, nobody's got it easy no matter what.
That's true. That's true.
I mean,
if you're going to be an artist, it's going to be a struggle. That's just the reality. Right. It's not, and a struggle, I don't mean a struggle in the sense that poverty necessarily or loneliness or whatever, right? I mean just a struggle in the constant fight to maximize the use of your time in such a way
Yeah.
that fulfills the best urges of your creative self.
Right.
Yeah, that's not easy. Even when you and this is where I think it comes down to being a non-financial issue, because you think of somebody who is very successful, who makes very large sculptures, say, or paintings. They have a lot of assistants, and they have a lot of all these projects going on around the world, and they have a certain image to maintain in the character of the work. Now, that sounds great, but what if you do that for 10 years and you start to get tired of it, and you really want to do and you do get tired of it, and you want to do something that is a little more intimate, or doesn't require all the mechanism of that system to keep it going. That's just the reality. And what I've found, and this is actually very pertinent to my present situation, because I've found that you have to. I think artists need to find little ways to reward themselves, right? Little ways to sort of satisfy the immediacy of the creative need, right? Because, and the reason for that is, when, like, for example, if I have a show coming up, I will spend 6 months doing production work, bronze work, right? Not creative work, just like bronze work. Sometimes a little
down
less,
dirty,
but
grinding.
It's down and dirty grinding and managing other people and trying to get the stuff together, and it's not easy to do. It can really drain you. If I'm teaching, if I'm teaching for a month somewhere, same thing. And then what happens is that sort of habit of production then enters the studio.
Right.
So for example, I have about 30 pieces in my studio right now that I'm working on. Right, because what happened to me was I started to get very exhausted by the ending of the process of each piece. So if people who look at my work will see this, that there's a certain amount of attention to the finish of things that requires some tedious work, whether that's a bronze work or the wax work for bronze casting or mold making or the finishing of the surface. And the part that I love the most is the beginning.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Like the part I love the most is when everything is just emerging, and it's sort of autochthonously emerging from the clay. It's like literally autochthonous, right? Because it's clay, right? It's coming out of the earth, right? And so that's the part that I get the most satisfaction with.
Yeah.
Right, and then, what happened? I developed this habit. Started a couple of years ago, where I would get excited by an idea and start pursuing it and blocking it out, and then I would just move on to another one, right? Because it's almost avoiding the next step.
Right.
And also, it wasn't just that it wasn't just a sense of avoidance. It was also that I got so much energy from that starting something that it spun off on these tangents of thought that made me want to do another piece. And so what ended up happening was I have all these pieces in my studio that are unfinished, and then I realized, I need to start finishing these.
Yeah.
Now I was right, so now I was trapped, because now I had 30 pieces where all the fun part was done. And now I have to finish all of these.
Yeah, now not 6 months. Now it's like a year and a half of process
right.
work.
Probably a year and a half, 2 years. So obviously I'm going to finish them, because they're all of them have seeds of ideas that I still need to develop. My process is very. It may look from the end product like it's very predetermined, but it's not at all. I'm very much I'm very responsive in my studio practice. Like if I'm using a model, I get the model in. I don't know what I'm going to do before they arrive. I have parameters, of course. I'm not just going to randomly start doing something. It would be a waste of time and money. But it's a fairly open-ended set of parameters. Okay, and so that is a very exciting procedure for me, and it's something that unfolds over the development of an idea as I work. Like it's in the working that the idea develops, not beforehand. And so anyway, getting back to what I was saying, a little bit of an aside there, but what I was saying is that I found myself in this cul-de-sac, right? And now this gets back to the point. I'm going to pull this all the way back around to what we were saying. But I found myself in this cul-de-sac where I have all these pieces that need my attention to finish them. And they're all going to be, there's going to be tediousness to each of them at a certain stage. That's just the way art is. There's this, whether it's framing or shipping something, there are all these things that you have to do that are not creative. They're not fun. So anyway, mold making is not the funnest thing, as you can attest.
I can attest to that fully.
Yeah.
Me and everybody who's ever helped me can attest. It is high stress, low reward.
Yeah, that's right, and high risk.
Yeah, high risk. That's right.
But so anyway, I know I have that coming down the pipe. So what I started to do was get models in for quick sessions, just sketching clay.
Yeah.
Things so if you go to my Instagram now, you'll see I've started to post a little bit of it. I have about 5 of them now. And I'm going to start firing terracottas of just things that I can do in 5 hours or less.
And
right?
Call it finished.
And
right? Yeah.
and call it and just say that's it. I'm done because getting into that, just having that as part of my studio practice, it releases the tension of all the other things that are there. Now, where I bring that back to what we were saying about the struggle of being an artist and all these different traps that we can find ourselves in, even if you have all the money in the world, you're going to find these traps exist. And so what I think every artist needs to do is find ways to reward themselves like that, and be very aware of what they're getting out of the process at each particular stage, and not let themselves get pulled in directions that are going to be unsatisfying, emotionally and spiritually unsatisfying.